Hey everyone, little different here. We taped this episode a couple days ago, and today we all just got word that Kenny Holtzman died. So we even brought up Kenny Holtzman during this, a game that he pitched against Sandy Koufax that you'll hear in this episode from my special guest. But I wanted to talk a little bit about Kenny and just mention, him and my dad, they were dear friends. Kenny, I remember, wrote him a beautiful note when my dad was getting his second leg amputated, and just talked about how much he cared for my dad and their friendship and their playing days together. And Kenny was a great guy. Everyone liked him, and he was a great competitor. Look at the games that he pitched for the Cubs, the great years, 17 wins, and then going over to Oakland and winning 3 World Series. Amazing career, amazing guy, amazing pitcher. The 69 Cubs, he was a huge part of them. With that pitching staff, him and Fergie and Bill Hands were the 3 main guys that just, carried that team for more than a few years. But more than that, Kenny just had great character. And we're going to miss him. And I just wanted to say that before this episode started. Rip Kenny Holtzman. We love you, man. This episode is brought to you by Gino's East, L.A. Gino's East is one of Chicago's most famous deep dish pizza places. They've been open since 1966. And there are still some people who don't realize Gino's East is here in L.A. now, too. And let me tell you, it feels like you're in Chicago when you're in there. I'm in there most every Friday for happy hour, and it feels like home. Home for us Chicagoans, and a friendly place for people who have never experienced Chicago to get a real feel and real taste for what it is that so many people rave about. I always have a difficult time deciding what to order at Gino's because there's so much great stuff on the menu. My go-to is probably the tavern pizza, cheese and sausage, but when I see someone next to me eating the deep dish, my mouth starts to water. Then I see the Italian beef with giardiniera, and I want to snatch it from the waiter's tray. Every friend I take there never leaves without feeling like they just experienced a meal in Chicago. They can't wait for me to invite them back, and I just tell them they can go there without me. Gino's East of Chicago in Los Angeles was named Best Pizza in the Southland by the LA Times readers 2 years in a row. There's half-price bottles of wine on Mondays and Tuesdays, lunch special every weekday, personal-size 7-inch deep dish salad, and a pop for $12.95. Italian beef, fries, and a pop for $12.95. That's pretty good. It's more than just a Chicago restaurant. It's one of the best restaurants in L.A. Check out the friendly confines of Gino's East L.A. today on the corner of Coldwater Canyon and Riverside Drive, just off the 101. See you there on Friday sometime. Sit back and relax. It's time for peanuts, popcorn, and Cracker Jacks. Hey, how's it going? I'm your host, Jeff Santo. I'm here with my wife, Christie.
Hello, hello.
It's a rainy day today, and I was thinking maybe we might watch a baseball movie.
Ooh.
And I was thinking, what are your top 5 baseball movies of all time?
Of all time?
Feature films, yes.
Feature film movie. Bull Durham, number 1.
Number 1 for you, Bull Durham.
Absolutely.
Why?
Well, not only is it a love story and it's baseball, but it's baseball and a love story, but it's also so deep. The theology of that, just it opens up with, I believe in the Church of Baseball. And it's just so good.
That's true. And
she's such a cool character.
And it's sexy. There's no doubt. So a lot of women love Bull Durham. Mm-hmm. They got attracted to Bull Durham.
What's your number 1?
My number, The Natural.
That's my number 5.
Okay. My number 1, because I like more dramatic baseball stories.
And I like the noir in that.
The noir I love.
Yeah.
Didn't think about it so much back then, but now that we're such noir buffs and that's part of our direction. Is like, yeah, that was a part of it that was just really interesting, and I like the older guy coming back, getting a second chance. The corruption in there, and a guy just staying honest. A lot to like. There's a lot to like about that film.
That's a hefty film. It's got
Yeah.
a lot of
hmm
moving parts.
And
Yeah.
the femme fatale. I mean, on a couple levels, right? And the crappy owner, the coach that you think might not be a great, he's there with the guy.
And it's a cool period piece.
Great period piece.
Without trying too hard. It doesn't feel like it's costumey. It feels real.
And they always take the kid was a country kid, Robert Redford's character, right? Country kid out of the farm, and got his bat by his lightning hitting the tree, after his dad died. So all that stuff.
It felt mythical.
Very mythical. Loved it. So that's my number one. So give me two.
Number two, A League of Their Own.
Okay, beautiful. Yeah, yeah, beautiful story. That would be my number 4.
Okay.
Yeah, League of Their Own, excellent. Number 2 for me would be Field of Dreams.
Okay.
Another kind of dramatic, deep.
Field of Dreams didn't make my list, but
why?
But I always watch it when it comes on. When I'm seeing it.
How does it not make your list?
I don't know.
What do you mean you don't know?
Well,
maybe it's a father and son story.
Maybe because it's a supernatural.
Supernatural in a way, yeah. I mean, you could go supernatural. So was like hitting the lights in The Natural when they exploded. There was some super.
Well, I have to say
the lightning bolt.
The Natural and Field of Dreams were kind of neck and neck for me, and I put.
I got you. Okay, yeah. Field of Dreams to me is just again very creative to take a baseball story like that, and now look where the cornfield is. It's there permanent forever. That movie left a mark on our culture. 3.
Okay, so my number 3 is Moneyball.
Moneyball number 3. I got Bull Durham as 3.
Okay.
All right. Yeah, I was thinking Moneyball 3. Actually, Moneyball's 4 for me. No, Moneyball's 5 for me. Yeah, League of Their Own is 4. Now I just might as well barf them all out. And Bull Durham is 3. Yeah, I got a honorable mention of Long Gone. How about you?
Okay, my honorable mention would be Field of Dreams, but my number 4 is Fever Pitch.
Fever Pitch. Is that a
baseball?
All right,
movie.
It's a Boston Red Sox film.
He's
is what it is.
obsessed with the Boston Red Sox.
Yeah, obviously.
It's a romantic.
The Yankees
drama,
hate that film. Let me just tell you. It'd be like if a Cardinal film is my favorite film, a Cardinal film. I don't know if you. All right, you can call it that because there's a love story.
More.
Yeah, it was cute. It was
and
cute.
That was the year that they won.
Of course, yeah. Crazy. They had to change the film up a little bit.
And they were filming the same time, and so they had to come back for filming and then run out in the field. That was amazing.
I'm with you.
Yeah.
I liked it. I liked it. I can't, I liked it. So, well, yeah, there it is. You got any, throw your favorite films our way. I want top 5. If you can send it to our email, right?
Yeah.
What's our email?
jeff.ppcpodcast@gmail.com.
Awesome. And we got a great guest today that if all parents out there who has a kid that's seriously interested in filmmaking and what it takes to get your film into the marketplace, please listen to this episode. This guy is the master of independent filmmaking.
Sure is.
And wow, can't wait for you to hear this. This is a filmmaking podcast. Enjoy. That's it.
Enjoy.
This podcast is brought to you by Bernie's Tap and Grill. It's family owned and operated since 1954. Located across from Wrigley Field on Clark and Waveland. My dad hit a few home runs on the Waveland Avenue, and Bernie's was my dad's favorite place to go. It's got delicious food, 4 full-service bars, an awesome beer garden, a sidewalk patio cafe, and a cool upstairs area. It's the place I've always met my friends at before and after games. Go on by and tell Linda Dillman Jeff Santos sent you. Bernie's Tap and Grill, where you go when you go to Wrigley. My special guest is a master of independent filmmaking. I don't think there's another person out there who has more experience in every aspect of the making and the selling of an independent film than my special guest. He worked through 5 decades of evolving films and filmmakers. He's ran 3 different types of studios. He's one of the original advisors to the Sundance Institute. and he's a Cubs fan. Even though he spent most of his life living in New York, he's a Cubs fan. And his company, Emerging Pictures, distributed This Old Cub back in 2004. It was the greatest post film experience I've ever had in my entire filmmaking career. Nothing compares to it. Ira Deutchman, thank you for being on the show.
My pleasure, Jeff. And boy, that was a really great intro. Thank you.
Hey, man, it's true. There is no one that has the experience, the years. It's amazing what you've done with your career, Ira. And I was fortunate that you gave me a call back in, 2003. We'll get into that later. Let's start with, how did you become a Cubs fan? Where did your love for the Chicago Cubs start?
Well, I mean, it's a great question, and I've been thinking a lot about it lately. It's funny, when people sometimes ask me the question, why is it that you've spent your entire life in independent film? Why did you never become like a studio guy or whatever? And my answer is because I'm a Cubs fan. It's like there's just something about that urge to see the underdog win, and it captured me at a very young age. My parents moved me um, around a lot when I was a kid. My dad kept getting transferred from one part of the country to another. And in the middle of third grade, we moved from the Bronx to Chicago. And we were living on the South Side, which by all rights should have meant that I should have become a Sox fan. But
Right.
most of my friends were Sox fans. But my dad was a displaced Brooklyn Dodgers fan. At that point, the Dodgers were already in Los Angeles, but my dad's fandom held, and it was during a time when the Dodgers were doing incredibly well, and he brought me to Wrigley to see the Dodgers play. And it's hard to go to Wrigley as a young person and not fall in love. I mean, it's the atmosphere, it's at that time the Cubs were basically nothing. I mean, they were like doing just about nothing. We're talking about the early '60s at this point. And I did see an incredible game, and I must have been like 10 or 11 years old or something, something like that, where Sandy Koufax pitched against Ken Holtzman, and Holtzman won the game 1-0.
Wow.
It was, so what's funny is that at that age, that would be considered a boring game. There was not a whole lot of action on the field, but that memory stuck with me. But then where it really got solidified was when my family then moved back to the New York area, which happened in the middle of high school, and I was devastated by being yanked away from my friends, and to have to reconnect with people at that age. I mean, it's like the worst thing you could do as a parent is to move kids in the middle of high school. And I was plopped into a New Jersey suburb where all the kids were either Yankees or Mets fans,
Right.
and it really just somehow my missing Chicago manifested itself in becoming a much more rabid Cubs fan. And the next little tidbit is something that you've witnessed because I showed this to you at the Hall of Fame, but I started subscribing to the Chicago newspapers, which, by the way, in those days there was no internet, no whatever,
Right.
and I would actually get the Chicago newspapers 5 or 6 days late because they would come in the mail, and I clipped out every single article about the Cubs and created a scrapbook, which is what you saw when I showed it to you at the Hall of Fame, and it just so happened that summer it was the summer of '69, that notorious year when the Cubs looked like they were finally going to do something, and I was getting so excited. And bottom line is that the Mets, the so-called miracle Mets, basically squashed all of my hopes and dreams. And to make matters worse, I was living in New York at the time,
Right. Oh my.
and I was at that Black Cat game, that famous Black Cat game.
Were you really?
Yeah, my
Wow.
dad. My dad brought me. He thought he was doing me a huge favor. Brought me to see the Cubs at at Shea Stadium, And I remember all of those people waving the white handkerchiefs and yelling, chanting "Goodbye, Leo." And
Yeah.
I got pelted by a couple of beers at one point because I was rooting for the Cubs. So yeah, I was pretty scarred.
You had to be the only New Yorker cheering for the Cubs, right? You had to be,
Well, I mean, I don't know about only, but certainly the only one I knew.
right? So 69, man, wow. Did you have any favorites on that team? I mean, I never really even asked you about that.
Yeah, I mean, all of them, really. I used to chant the lineup, Kessinger, Becker, Williams, Santo, Banks. It's like,
Wow.
from there it got a little flaky, but those five guys, um, and Bill Hands and Ferguson
Yeah,
Jenkins. I mean, it was quite an amazing team. And boy, it's funny because over the years, while that definitely was something that scarred me for life, that whole 69 thing. And I love the moment in This Old Cub where your dad is dealing with that call in where they ask, my wife, my fiance is a Mets fan, what should I do? And he says dumper.
yeah,
But to understand how devastating that was to the Cub fans who had been with them for all that time without any hope of a championship, and then seeing it be squandered in that kind of way. But I've gotten a lot of pleasure over the last couple of decades by the fact that the Cubs have been in the postseason way more than the Mets have. And
right.
it's the Mets who have become the ones who end up blowing it at the end of the year. And so I'm always twisting that. All my Mets fan friends, send them little messages every now and then, going, "Who are the losers now?"
Right. It took 40 years, right? Oh man. But and then you wound up at Northwestern, which is where you started, studying film and TV. Did you always know that you wanted to get into film and TV? When did that start for you?
Yeah, sort of. I mean, I point to the moving around as a catalyst that made me fall in love with the movies, because every time my family moved and I had to start making friends all over again, I found solace in movie theaters. I would just, it was a place to hang out where I could be with other people, experience this collective thing where people would be laughing and crying and, whatever. And I would just hang out in movie theaters. And so it was always a love. I didn't think of it as a career. I mean, it didn't seem sane at the time to think of that as anything that I would end up doing eventually, as a way of making money. And we'll get into this later, but
Yeah.
it's not really a way of making money. But um,
Well, you did, and I mean, you've had a brilliant career, and you started in Northwestern. I mean, I couldn't believe. Is it true that you started distributing films while you were going to school? You did a John Cassavetes film, "The Woman Under the Influence." Am I correct?
yeah, I mean, what happened was I got involved at Northwestern in activities in the what's called the Activities and Organizations Board. So I was involved with booking films, and I mean, it was my first experience, sort of semi-professionally, having to, what we always call put butts in seats. I had to
Right.
make sure that I was programming in a way where the students would show up and do whatever. And one day, out of the blue, I got a phone call from this guy by the name of Blaine Novak, who was working for John Cassavetes, and who said that they were doing this thing at college campuses all over the country where they were premiering A Woman Under the Influence on campus and recruiting college campus folks like me to actually do all the promotions work to for those premieres. So that sounded really exciting to me, and so
Yeah.
I ended up booking what they called the Midwest premiere of A Woman Under the Influence. It was in a 600-seat auditorium. It sold out. I got to do an introduction of John Cassavetes and Jenna Rollins and Peter Falk, in front of this crowd.
They all
Um,
showed up to the screening.
yeah, they were all there.
Oh,
Yeah,
great! Wow. That's amazing. I mean, think about that. That's what Cassavetes had to do to get his films out, right? I mean,
that's right.
it's still happening. Being an independent filmmaker or promoter, you have to get your film out a different way. And so you started right there at the grassroots with one of the top independent filmmakers of all time.
Yeah, I
That's
mean, and
amazing.
And again, I didn't understand the history at that time. All I understood was that he was trying something new and interesting and different, and that, it sounded like fun. It's a lot of work, obviously,
Was it
and
fun?
yeah, it was fun. It was fun. I mean, look, it's not fun when people don't show up,
Right.
but in this case, they did show up, so it was fun.
Well, you went on to do many classic independent films. I mean, you were part of Monty Python and the Holy Grail, Pumping Iron, Sex, Lies, and Videotape, which was one of the main independent films that took off, that changed the landscape. And then Hoop Dreams, which is, wow, probably the greatest documentary of a sports documentary ever that had legs like a feature. Talk about that. How did you then take that and steer into a direction to be part of these classic indie art films?
My first job out of college was working for this guy Don Rugoff, who I never had heard of him personally, but when I was in high school and going through one of my phases of movie going, I was familiar with a lot of the movies that Rugoff distributed. I never put two and two together to say, oh, this is all coming from this one guy or whatever, but he definitely had an influence on my um, the development of my particular taste in films. And they were definitely, I mean, you got to remember, it was the 60s, in this case the later 60s, where part of my identity became being a renegade, like somebody who hippie, if you will. I mean, I wasn't literally one, but but it was that,
Right.
it was when the counterculture was really sort of becoming something. And so when I graduated from college, I got a tip that this company, Cinema Five, was looking for somebody to do non-theatrical sales, to sell films to colleges and libraries and stuff like that. And I had been on the other side of those phone calls when I was at Northwestern, because I was booking films from those types of companies. So I went in, got the job, and I ended up working for this crazy man by the name of Don Rugoff. And I observed over the next 3 years while I was working there a guy who was truly a genius at taking very strange, offbeat movies that nobody else would have taken on and turning them into, in some cases, sensations, in other cases, not so much. But just the cleverness of some of the things that he would do. And as you know, I eventually ended up making a
Yeah,
movie on Rugoff,
right.
um, because I owe my career to him. So I feel, like answering your question about, why I got involved with those kinds of movies and the kinds of things that I did to try to get attention for them. I would say that even though I didn't realize it at the time, I think it was all about witnessing Rugoff. And what's so interesting about him is that he truly was crazy. I mean, he was, like he was off. And I think that being off made him think about things differently than other people. And it was part of the reason why he was willing to take chances on films that nobody else would take the chance on. And I think one of the big lessons for me was and maybe this is why I never really truly ended up working in Hollywood, is that working on something that would be considered a sure thing, or what they call in the business a slam dunk, or
Mhm.
whatever. There's no such thing as a slam dunk. It's like when you try to repeat the success of other films that have already worked in the marketplace, by the time you're making that film and getting it out there, people are looking for something new, different. I mean, it's a lesson that we learn over and over and over again, that people don't want the same old, same old. They want something new. And Rugoff was accidentally doing that. He was always reaching for something that looked nuts on the surface. And then, Monty Python and the Holy Grail is a perfect example of that. That was a movie that almost every studio had turned down for distribution. Monty Python was not well known at the time. They had a show that was on PBS. I mean, that was about it. And Rugoff looked at that movie. I don't think he understood it. I don't think he laughed. I don't think, but he looked at it and he went, "This is different. This is weird." And he put it out there and he did all of this crazy stuff to market that movie. And as a result of his efforts, I got to work on that film. And again, just observing him do this stuff was definitely an accidental inspiration.
Yeah, when you work with a guy like that and you know he's a little off, like when you say crazy, like what does that mean? Like, was he hard to work with, or were you like at times going, well, he's brilliant, but now I don't know. Are you guessing because you're young, he's older, obviously, right? Tell me the structure of his setup. How did it work?
It was, well, look, first of all, he ran not just a distribution company, but he also owned a lot of theaters. His company owned a lot of theaters. The theater part of the company he inherited from his father. And but he was the one who expanded it and turned it into something a little bit different. But owning your own theaters gives you a little bit of leverage in terms of acquiring movies that you actually do want to distribute. I mean, and he had the best theaters in New York City. Like they were gorgeous, mid-century, in some cases Art Deco, in some cases like ultra modern theaters that were purpose-built for movies. They were not theaters that used to be vaudeville theaters or things like that. And so filmmakers, the most prestigious filmmakers in the world, they all wanted to be in his theaters. So, that was so when you're picturing what the company was, there was I would say, maybe 30 employees, something along those lines. We had an office that was on Madison Avenue and 57th Street in the fanciest part of town, but it was right in the middle of the area where all the theaters were. um, the structure of the company, kind of getting back to the point that I think you were trying to make, is that there was Rugoff, and then there was everybody else. There was really no hierarchy, and everybody was sort of scared of him. Not because he was, violent, or he wasn't a Harvey Weinstein type at
Mm-hmm.
all, but he was somebody who would put you in your place, second guess everything you did. Like if he got mad at you, you would be banished for a couple of days. He would hire and fire people on a whim. I mean, there were stories that people tell in the movie that I made about coming in to have a meeting with him, and where, like, just on the spur of the moment, he would hire them, and then 3 weeks later, like, they'd piss him off somehow and he'd fire them. And one of the reasons why I kept getting ahead in the company was that I really wasn't thinking of that as being my career. I wanted to make movies. So, for me, this was like, it was a job. It was a way of making some money and, learning a little something. It was definitely an exciting place to work. I met a lot of filmmakers who were heroes of mine, but I was never afraid of being fired, because I just, like, it wasn't my idea of what I was going to end up doing with my life. So I resigned my position 3 times, not because I was mad at him or anything, but because I wanted to go do other things. And every time I quit, he gave me a raise and a promotion. And and at that point, I would say, okay, well, maybe I'll hang in here a little bit longer. So I went, in a very short period of time, I went from non-theatrical sales to theatrical sales to co-op advertising to being in charge of advertising to being in charge of acquisitions. I mean, and this was all within 3 years of graduating from college.
Holy cow!
So I literally worked in every aspect of the company. And what's so funny is that you, again, because Rugoff was so out of his mind, like, he would set you off on a task that had nothing to do with your job, and it would turn out to be this amazing opportunity. Sometimes, I mean, there were times when I would be walking into his office to give him a report about some important thing that I was working on, and he'd be on the phone, and then he would turn to me and we'd go over to the Sutton Theater, they're out of toilet paper. It's like, I'm your head of acquisitions, why am I going to the Sutton Theater to change the toilet paper? He goes, because we just got a complaint, go over there. So there was that side of things.
Right.
But then the other side of things was that, like, within, I would say, maybe 3 months of getting the job, it might have even been sooner than that, because I started in September. No, yeah, it was probably about a year later. I was in his office, and again, young guy, just reporting to him on something or other, and he gets a phone call and he turns to me and he goes, "You want to go to Toronto this weekend?" And I said, "What for?" He goes, "They're having a film festival there, and they're willing to pay for somebody to go up there And it was just I happened to be sitting in his office,
Oh
and so
man.
I ended up at the first Toronto Film Festival as one of the only Americans that was at that festival, and it was only because I happened to be sitting in Rugoff's office at that moment.
Wow.
Yeah,
That is amazing. Now, his company was kind of like a half studio, right? Because you didn't create content, but you brought in content that didn't have a home and probably was never going to find a home, right?
that's right.
So you are really like creating this content because it's lost out there. It's not going to find a place. Now, when you did that, how did you know the magic of a film? How did you, when you got to that position, know what you were looking for that he was going to accept?
It's a good question because he was so impulsive. Sometimes I would recommend a film and he would just shrug his shoulders and go, not for us, with no reasoning. No. Sometimes it was, and this is an impulse I've seen in a lot of people who hang around in the movie business long enough. Sometimes it was just a reaction to a film that he had once handled a while ago that was superficially similar to this film, and because that one didn't work, he has like a scar tissue from that, and it's so he's not interested in it. I can remember a couple of circumstances like that, and there are other times where I would turn down a movie and later find out that because some friend of his had seen it and recommended it to him, that all of a sudden it was top priority for him. He was it was not, there was no rational thing going on. It was very gut level, and it was all about him. It was all about his response to the movie. So, my job was really just to bring him the things that I thought could potentially intrigue him, and I think if I was doing that same job now, I think I understand his sensibility now better than I did at that time. But that's what it really is all about.
But
And that's what really acquisitions people at all the independent companies are constantly doing. They're looking at movies and they're trying to understand who are we as a company? What kinds of films are we good at? Is this going to intrigue an audience or isn't it? And the thing that Rugoff was always looking for, and I do think there are companies that are getting very good at this again now, um, is a hook. What is it about this movie that we can talk about that's going to intrigue
hmm,
people?
gotcha. Now, when he picks a movie, though, like today, it almost seems like he deals directly with the filmmaker. Am I right? Were you dealing with the filmmaker, or were you dealing with the producer of the film that the filmmaker is closely associated with? How did that go down? Because to me, it's like we have missed for a long period of time. We've always talked about this, where the filmmaker is actually involved in the distribution of their film. And we did that with This Old Cub, which was beautiful, but that doesn't happen often, right? For someone like you to have the patience with someone like me who's on a second film, there's a tough, but we did it because there was so much there that we did understand that I was listening. Sometimes maybe got a little bullheaded, but at the end of the day, you steered us in the right direction of like you knew what I wanted this film to be. Did you have the same relationships with filmmakers going way back then with Rugoff?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, the who we were dealing with initially when we were acquiring these films depended. It was a wide range. It could be sometimes directly with the filmmaker, sometimes with the producer. And by the way, it's funny. I have this if you will, this bug up my ass about saying filmmakers and producers as two separate things because producers are filmmakers. So
Right, I know. I say that in a way of like, you're right.
no, no,
If you
no.
have a solid team, you're right, absolutely. But some
But
people don't look at it that way. You know what I
I know.
mean? So,
But in any case, I mean, sometimes there were sales agents involved. Sometimes they were agents from the agencies involved. It depended on the kind of film. I mean, a lot of the films that we were distributing at Cinema Five were foreign language films from other countries, and those films were mostly handled by sales agents.
mm,
There were a number of sales agents that were based in New York, and others that were based in Europe that were looking for American distribution for these foreign films, and so there were a lot of those. When it came to things like documentaries, in many cases, we were dealing directly with the filmmaking team.
Yes, right. That's how I should have put it. The filmmaking team, because you're right.
Yeah,
The director is also the producer with another producer that's over. You
right.
always have a partnership in that because there's so much work involved. So that's what I was meaning. Like you guys were dealing with sales agents, so they were still kind of not directly involved back then.
Right. And to the extent to which the filmmaking team ended up getting involved with the marketing of the films varied depending on a couple of different variables. Sometimes they didn't want to be involved. Like when we were distributing a Francois Truffaut film, he really didn't want to be involved.
Okay.
He would come to New York, do a little bit of press, go back to France, and that was the end of it. And it was really all left to us. When there are others that are a little bit more hands-on. And then there's, the issue of how much money did we pay for the movie? And if we were paying a lot of money for the movie because there was a competitive situation or something like that, then the balance of power shifts a lot because we're the ones that have taken a huge risk. And so, yeah, the filmmaking team might have an opinion,
Right, right.
but the reality is we were going to end up doing what we really needed to do to recoup our investment. Whereas in many other cases, if in fact there's not a ton of money involved, where there isn't a whole lot of risk involved, then there's really no harm in getting everybody involved and trying to do the best that you possibly can. My attitude has always been that nobody knows the film better than the people who made it.
Mhm.
Okay, but nobody knows marketing better than we do.
Right.
And while there are some filmmakers who are good at marketing, I mean, I think of people like Spike Lee, who's like
Mhm.
he's a master marketer. Michael Moore is a master marketer.
Yep.
Those people, they just have a sense of how to get attention, and they're creating their own hooks along the way, long before a distributor even gets involved. But the vast majority of filmmakers that I've worked with, they have aspirations for what they want to do in terms of reaching an audience, but they don't always completely understand the ways in which marketing works. And so, the best case scenario is it's a real collaboration, where you're talking about it from the perspective of what the intentions of the movie what were right from the
Mhm.
get-go, but then trying to translate that into a way in which you actually can get the right group of people interested in seeing it.
Right. And do you think it's today that we really don't have a system for independent filmmakers where because I believe if a filmmaking team goes out, makes a quality film, they're putting a lot of work into it. They have from start, they have done already so much work. And to get to that line, to get to you, they're ready to be part of something like we know our vision here. Is it is there a system coming together where filmmakers can be involved, like a first time filmmaker who has waited to do their film? Because I feel like when they're left out, that's where the attitude starts to go a different way, thinking their lack of trust. We've heard all the stories. I've been through the stories. Until I got to you, I had a story, right?
Yeah.
So you're coming in with a story going, wait a second, I went down this lane. It didn't happen the way that they told me it was going to happen. So how's it going to happen now with you?
Yeah, I mean, I think most distributors, including the major studios, I might add, they don't take the attitude that they're just going to cut the filmmakers out. What they do is they start out by sitting down, talking, whatever. The question is what happens next, and I sometimes I caution filmmaking friends of mine when they go into those meetings not to come off like know-it-alls, not only not to come off as a know-it-all, but not to do a lot of listening rather than talking. Because sometimes if you don't really know what you're talking about and you walk in and you
Mm-hmm.
make it look like you have unrealistic expectations, then immediately they begin to shut down. They don't want to, it's like, oh God, this person has no idea what they're talking about, and I'm going to be stuck with them for the next,
Right.
however long. So I feel like if I were giving filmmakers advice about what to do in those meetings, I would say get the other folks to do all the talking and then figure out how to navigate it, because you don't want to make it look like you think you know better than they do.
Right. Now, let me ask you this. When This Old Cub came about, talk about that, like how you got involved and how you first caught wind of it. And then I want to talk about what were your thoughts of when you first met me and what you just talked about.
Yeah, I mean, okay. So first of all, the way that I got involved, I have to go back and just say that because I have this passion for baseball, above and beyond the Cubs. I mean,
Right.
baseball movies have always been like a weakness of mine, where like even the ones where you're not supposed to cry, I end up crying. It's just one of my all-time favorite movies is The Bad News Bears. I mean, it's like I just love that movie.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, everything from The Natural to all the obvious ones. But anyway, so what in a certain kind of way, I always avoided getting involved with any baseball movie because I just figured that I wouldn't be able to assess it properly because I would be too emotional. I
Mm.
would be like my feeling was that I wouldn't do a good job because I would assume that everybody was going to respond as well as I did because I had this like emotional connection to it. So I purposely avoided being involved with baseball movies. Okay. So one day I open up I think it was on the web. I was just reading about Cubs stuff, and there was an article that I believe was in the Chicago Tribune, and it was just a column. It was not a major piece or anything, but it was just a column that mentioned this guy by the name of Jeff Santo was making a documentary about his father, and I'd been listening to Cubs games and hearing your dad on the air, and
Mm.
whatever, and it was intriguing enough that I was like, huh. I wonder if I should get in touch with this guy and maybe try to, see if I can be helpful. Um, I mean, I didn't know where this all was going to be going, but so I made a couple of phone calls. I know people in Chicago who work in the film business, and I reached John Iltis, who was a longtime Chicago publicist and marketer who handled everything from independent films to studio
Mm.
films, but who knew all the people at all the newspapers. And Iltis called up somebody at the Tribune, and the next thing I knew, I had gotten your email address.
Mm-hmm.
So just if I could probably search through my email and find the original email because I keep everything.
Right.
But I wrote you a note just saying I heard about this movie, explaining who I was, saying, if you're interested, I'd love to talk to you about how I could be helpful. And the next thing I knew, you invited me to see the movie in a editing room.
Mm-hmm.
Was it in LA? Is
It
that
was in
right?
LA. You came out
Yeah.
to LA. And then I remember getting because I got a call from the writer. I don't know if it was Paul Sullivan who wrote the article because we did a private screening for some people in Chicago and some reporters too, some sports reporters, and they wrote a little blurb on what they saw. So yeah, you came in and watched it, then you brought it back to your company and watched it there.
Yeah.
So
And my reaction to the movie was like I always again I put on my cynical hat automatically
mhm,
because again, like I'm too clouded by emotion to, being able to see the movie for what it is. And I started thinking about ways that maybe it could be a little streamlined or whatever. And I know we talked a little bit about that.
mhm.
I know that you were skeptical of my motivations at the beginning, which I understood because you didn't really know me.
And I was
Uh,
damaged from the first. So
right?
there you go.
Yeah,
I don't damage. I was like, okay, I'm not gonna let anything get by me on this one. Plus, it's my dad, right? And
right.
so went into a different kind of realm there. But I did get, yeah, the distribution side of my first film was a mess. Just trusting them on that. But go ahead.
Yeah, so that first interaction regarding potential changes in the movie didn't go anywhere. I mean, you put your foot down and kind of said it's done. And at that point, I just focused on, well, that's interesting. And what I was hearing from you, which I thought was really interesting and very refreshing in a way, and I know it was built on your frustration from your prior movie, was that you really weren't interested in seeking out traditional distribution. You were interested in doing it a different way. And that kind of got me turned on. I mean, because I'm attracted to those kinds of challenges, and going back to what we were talking about earlier, if you're looking for a hook, the hook was there. I mean, that there's this enormous fan base for the Cubs, that your dad was a hero to them, more than a hero, an icon. He was still active because he was on the radio, and that the radio broadcasts themselves, assuming that we could get your dad and Pat to to
Right.
cooperate, that there were ways of getting the message out inexpensively. That was,
Mhm.
that was the key, is that I wasn't going to allow you or anybody who I was in business with that was, putting your trust in me to spend more money than was necessary.
Mhm.
And that's always the dilemma with these things, is that to get attention under normal circumstances, you have to spend a ton of money. And is there any scenario in which you can actually see that money come back? Whereas with This Old Cub, I could see ways of using the the imprimatur of the movie, your dad's celebrity, and the real love for the Cubs, as a way of being able to do most of the marketing on a more promotional level, rather than by buying a lot of advertising, which we clearly couldn't afford.
Right.
So so yeah, I mean, so I could see a through line there. I could see a way of doing it. And so you and I just started brainstorming about it. And, clearly the place to start was going to be Chicago. Where
Yep.
else?
Mhm.
We did a lot of work getting in touch with the JDRF,
Mhm.
which, for those listening, it's the Juvenile Diabetes Research Foundation. And your dad was, a major source of income for them, because he
Mhm.
used to do these fundraisers. And so they were very indebted to him and willing to help work with us. We created a scenario in which the JDRF could use screenings of the movie, and a portion of the income that came in, toward trying to find a cure for juvenile diabetes. And so, as a result of doing that, they were working with us to promote the movie, which was another great hook.
Mhm.
Um, and that opened up a lot of doors for us in terms of getting the support of Chicago media, and certainly helped grease the wheels a little bit with WGN Radio, because as much as they would have wanted to support it just because your dad was on the air with them, and because of his, the reverence that they had for him as a Cub, um, knowing that there was an aspect of it that was going to charity also helped them to feel like they weren't
Right.
just doing this out of that they weren't just doing us a favor, that they were actually doing something good for the community and elsewhere. So those were the building blocks of the release of the movie. And when the film opened in Chicago, it did far better than anybody would have expected it to. And the next thing we knew, we had booking requests from all over the Midwest. It started to just sort of
Yeah.
grow in Chicago. And we played in so many theaters. I mean, when I think back on it, not everywhere was it a huge success, but it was a modest success wherever it played. And we were, I think we were pretty savvy about identifying the places where there were pockets of Cub fans
Right.
to be able to play it.
But you did a great thing here, man, where you were patient with us, me and Tim Comstock, who was my producing partner, and because we were new at it. But I was determined that I'm not going the old way. We're going to go our way. And once I heard that the plan that you put up for us, and it was dynamic because it was the first time you brought actually different digital projectors to the theater. Remember going in the Highland Park,
Yeah.
and so you were changing everything then. I mean, before it was actually changed over. Talk about that.
Yeah, that was, I mean, look, it's in a way it was a means to an end, but it was a solution to what could have been an expensive problem, which is that you had a movie that was shot on video, which most documentaries are, and but
part film for the big parts, but
yeah,
overall, yeah.
yeah. But the finished version of it was not on 35 millimeter film.
Right.
And so to put it in theaters was a little bit of a challenge. And this was before most theaters had changed over to digital. So we, Emerging Pictures, which was my company at that time, we were talking about being ahead of your time in both a positive and a negative way. We were putting digital projection systems into what we called alternative spaces. They were art film theaters, community theaters, but also places like museums and performing arts centers and places like that. And we were delivering the movies via hard drive to be plugged into a system that we would put into the booths of these theaters. But so we were already very well ensconced in that new technology. But in the case of This Old Cub, because our aspirations were to play a lot of theaters where it would not have made sense for us to put brand new equipment into all of all of those places, we made a deal with JVC and with NEC. NEC made the projectors, and JVC made these VHS decks. Believe it or not, they called it VHS.
They're like smaller VHS cassettes. Yeah.
Yeah, they were. It was called DVHS, digital VHS, and it was digital VHS was capable of a high definition image, a 2K high definition image, and they looked just like regular VHS decks. And so the combination of having some projectors available from NEC and these DVHS decks from JVC, too many initials, um, we were able to ship those relatively cheaply, so that we were shipping those along with a DVHS copy of the film to the theaters where we were playing. So these are theaters that didn't have digital capability, but we were putting it in temporarily so that they could play the film. And it was a really inexpensive solution to what could have been a very expensive problem. So yeah, we were definitely breaking new ground. I don't know if you remember this, but the funniest.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Talk about Arizona?
Yes.
Oh,
Yeah.
my God.
I know.
That's so nuts.
It was the funniest thing. When you're playing with new technology, you just never know what's going to happen. And we did a great screening at it was the Shea 14 screening room, this theater in Scottsdale, where all of the Cubs were invited to see the movie at this theater during spring training. And and a lot of them came, right?
Oh yeah. Kerry Wood, yeah, a lot of the big guys came.
Yeah, and so then we start the screening, and we're using this DVHS deck and the projector that we had put in, and all of a sudden there started to be this crackle in the soundtrack and like these glitches on screen, and they would happen every once in a while, and I'm trying to figure out what was happening. And at one point, I'm standing in the lobby because I'm complaining to the theater that there's something wrong, and whatever. And I hear them on a walkie-talkie, talking to the booth. And the minute that they pressed the walkie-talkie button, I heard the glitch happen in the theater. And all of a sudden, I realized the walkie-talkies were what was like interfering with the film. And so I told them, "Shut the fuck up!"
Yeah. And unfortunately, I had one of those walkie-talkies, right? So I was communicating, watching the film, and every time I hit it, the film stopped. And I got so upset, I had to get this. I went to the bar next door and had a shot of tequila. Ira, I can't take it anymore. This has to get fixed. And it was me hitting the walkie-talkie.
All I can say is that it's good we can laugh about it all these years later, because boy, it was terrible.
That was
thinking about having all those Cubs in the room and that the projectors were breaking down and whatever. But once we realized the problem, we stopped, and then it was fine from then on.
Something else, man. And I remember too, we got to talk about real quickly this, when we first put it out there, we put it up at the Cubs convention, and you brought in one of those projectors, and we're like, how's this going to go? Right? We didn't know what was going to happen because John McDonough said, hey, you guys can play at the Cub convention. I'm thinking, wow, we're showing it to a lot of people. I'm thinking as a filmmaker, well, that's a lot of people. Why we got to show it to so many people for free, right? The best thing we ever did. So for filmmakers that think like you got to be smart on how you put it out there and how you do have to do free screens to get the word of mouth going. But that screening, when we put it out in that ballroom, I remember like how many people are going to show up there, and like 1,500 people showed up in the ballroom. They were up on the balconies. That was quite an event, man, that you put on. And that really right there made the film, because then all the reporters wrote about it. It was a big deal from that point.
That was a really incredible screening.
Yeah.
There's been very few screenings in my life that were that emotional. Because the fans are just so invested. If they're going to be at the Cubs convention, they are invested.
Right.
And the movie is so poignant, and so it's there's no doubt that by the end of that they were all probably weeping, and
right. But to put it in a ballroom, like you said, an unconventional place where the sound isn't that great, you had to do a lot of work there to make it work, and it worked, right? And so those are the key kind of things you're talking about that I don't know if enough people are doing that today. Like, there are so many independent venues out there, historical societies. I did it with another film of mine, and it just doesn't seem like there's a place that is constantly doing that with new films. You know what I mean? Because it's hard for a new film to stay in the theaters for a full week. No one goes during the week much anymore. But the weekends, if you do it like a bit of a rock show on the weekends, it can work.
Yeah, I mean, look, I don't know if you want to get into this yet, but I'm optimistic about the future of theatrical movie going.
Okay.
I feel like there's been a generational shift.
Great.
The pandemic kind of brought on a a little bit of an issue, mostly with older moviegoers, where I feel like their mobility was already challenged, and I'm talking about people like in their 60s and 70s or whatever, who were they were the traditional art house audience, the ones that would show up for these more offbeat movies, the same people who when they were younger were the ones going to Rugoff's movies, right?
Right.
That was the most prevalent part of the art film audience, were these older people. And during the pandemic, they got used to watching stuff on the streaming networks, not leaving home, having trouble hearing, and therefore being able to put the subtitles on the screen, and whatever.
Right.
Those are the people who were having a lot of trouble getting back into movie theaters again. But ironically, post-pandemic, there's a lot of younger people going to the movies again, and they're gravitating towards similarly offbeat, cutting edge kinds of movies, original kinds of movies that are sort of like the movies that older generation cut their teeth on when they were younger.
Right.
And you're seeing it with companies like A24 and Neon, and to some extent, Magnolia and a couple of others who are doing a little bit of what Rugoff used to do. They're making movies that are, the word I would use is transgressive. They're movies that are in your face in some way. And as a result, they can get attention for them. Those movies are doing really well. And I mean, all I can say is that if they keep doing that sort of thing, we're going to see a whole other generation of people growing into, becoming rabid moviegoers.
Nice.
These are, I mean, look, these are people who were cooped up for 2 years or whatever, and now the idea of being in a place where they can have this communal experience with other folks, and all it takes is getting people back into the movies once or twice where they have a good experience and they go, oh, I remember what this is like. This is fun. This is much more interesting than sitting at home, putting my feet up on the couch and whatever. Another opinion that I have about all this is that when you read the trade papers, the pundits about the death of theatrical moviegoing, and they talk about how the only movies that are going to get people to go back to the multiplex are these big, blockbuster movies where you want to see them on the biggest screen possible with the loudest sound possible, and all this other stuff. And what's interesting is that those films are not working at the moment. All the Marvel movies lately have all been busts. Pixar's been having problems lately with their films. I think that what the point that a lot of people are missing is that the movies that really need theatrical exposure are the more difficult movies. The ones where if you were to flip them on Netflix or whatever, and like it takes 20 minutes before you sort of know what's going on, and it's you're not sure quite what it's about yet and whatever, and it's just too easy to pause it, go to the bathroom,
Mhm.
go to the
Right.
refrigerator, change the channel, whatever. Whereas the minute you're in a movie theater and you're invested already in the experience, and the movie has taken over your awareness, like because it's immersive, because like you're seeing detail that you wouldn't see on a home screen, or hearing things that maybe you wouldn't be hearing, and you have no option to pause it, to go to the bathroom, to do whatever. And so you stick around a little longer, and you suddenly go, oh, now I see what they're after. This is kind of interesting. So those more difficult movies are the ones that benefit the most from that big communal experience of being with an audience in a theater. So I think it's exactly the opposite of what the
Wow.
pundits say.
That's promising. And for filmmakers who want to do their first film, who went to film school, who are working toward it, is there an independent path today to do it outside of the system and then bring their film and get it sold? Are you seeing that happen today?
Yeah, I mean, it's difficult, but it was always difficult. I
Right,
mean, it
right.
wasn't like it was easy when we
No, never.
know. The theaters, the independent theaters, not the chains necessarily, but the independent theaters, I think are always open to working directly with filmmakers.
Hmm.
Again, as long as they feel like the filmmakers are have a little bit of an idea of how
Yep.
they're going to get an audience to come. In a way, film festivals are like the audition places for that sort of thing, where, a lot of exhibitors go to film festivals, watch movies, they take notes, they're primed for potentially, working with you. But then the question is, can do you have that hook? Can you get out there and make noise and make
Right.
people interested in seeing the movie? And I think that what's a little bit more difficult than used to be the case is that the press, they have their own issues in terms of finding people, finding audiences, and most of the newspapers around the country have laid off most of their arts coverage
Hmm.
folks. There's daily newspapers have way lower circulation than they ever did. Television advertising is just out of the question for little
Yep.
independent films because it's too expensive. So I think that the ways in which you can actually get an audience for a smaller independent film, you're going to have to depend on grassroots stuff. Taking advantage of social media, which actually is potentially very targeted, but you have to be very clever about how to use it. It's easier to say, let's just go viral than it is to actually go viral.
Right.
It's like you can't control these things, but you can try to work it to the extent that it's out there. I mean, I would say just hire some young people. It's like the old Groucho
Yeah,
Marx.
go back to, yeah, that are ready to get their hands dirty and think of, take your resources, find your niche, right? Because usually those independent films have some type of niche. Like you said, the hook in the marketing, not the hook in the story, the hook in the marketing is
That's
what you're
right.
looking for, which is great. And I want to get back to a film that you did that was such a huge success, Hoop Dreams. To
Mhm.
talk about that and how we're describing an independent filmmaker getting their film out. Those guys, when they went at it, wow. I mean, they started as a short film and then boom, they went a different way. Talk about that.
Yeah, I mean, the history of that movie is really interesting. It did, as you point out, it started as a short film. The original concept was that they were going to just follow a bunch of, actually, they were following this scout who was going around to playgrounds in Chicago to find potential talent to get them into high school programs and develop them to become eventual NBA stars or whatever. But then they found these two young boys who seemed incredibly talented, and where their story and their families seemed interesting enough that they just continued following them. And eventually they ended up getting funding from PBS to actually continue making the movie. And I think it was something like 6 years that they followed these
Wow.
two kids.
Wow.
And then, of course, trying to boil that down in the editing room took a long time as well. So when they finished the film, it's ironic, of course, that we're talking about this vis-a-vis This Old Cub because they're both kind of Chicago stories. But they had a screening for Gene Siskel and Roger Ebert, who were the big kahunas of Chicago criticism at the time. And it was a pretty risky move on their part to screen it for these two critics without even having a release at that point. They didn't have any idea what the film was going
to. How
to.
Did they get a screening with those two guys?
I think it was Iltis that did it.
Wow.
Talking about before, who managed to get them to screen it, and they both completely flipped over the film. In the meantime, while this was going on, they got the film into Sundance, and the film was screened there, and went over like gangbusters. I mean, I at the time I was working at Fine Line. That's an understatement. I was running Fine Line.
Yeah, you're running. So that's a real studio. You talk about Fine Line was one of the big players. So
yeah, and we had looked. I mean, before any festival, we look through the whole catalog of films, and we prioritize. We look at the ones that look like they have a hook or they have something about them that makes it look like they might be commercial. And Hoop Dreams, frankly, when we looked at it in the catalog, looked like it had no potential whatsoever. So it wasn't on my priority list at all. Liz Mann, who I don't know if you ever met her, but she used to work for me.
Yeah.
She decided to go see Hoop Dreams at Sundance only because she was a basketball fan and she just thought it would be fun to see it. She again there was no reason business wise other than just that she wanted to see the movie. When she came out of the film, tears streaming out of her eyes, she contacted me and just said, "You know what? You should go see this movie." And the next time it was playing, it turned out that it was a time when I had a lunch appointment, and I said, "Well, you know what I'll do is I'll go to see the beginning of the movie, and I'm just gonna have to duck out and go to see this go to this lunch." So I went to see the beginning of the movie, and the movie just grabbed me, and I stepped out of the room, out of the theater for just a second to use my cell phone to call the person I was supposed to have lunch with and said, "I'll see you later, but I have something I have to do." Went back in, saw the rest of the movie, and I was just completely blown away. So Liz and I just started brainstorming, about this crazy idea of a nearly 3-hour documentary about basketball that was shot, by the way, on 8 millimeter video. It was like, really low resolution for the most part, although they did, as they were filming over the years, they did graduate to better types of video. So it was a mixed bag. That, was there any way in the world to sell this movie? And, I contacted Iltis because I knew him and he was handling theoretically the sale of the film. I ran into him at the closing night party after Hoop Dreams won the audience award. And I went up and congratulated him. And I said, listen, John, the rumors on the streets are that you guys are looking for a multi-million-dollar deal for this movie. I said, if that's what you're looking for, it ain't going to happen with me. But should you come to your senses, I'd be interested in talking about potentially distributing this movie. So
can I stop you right there for a second? When you say come to your senses, so you knew right away that's not going to happen.
I wasn't going to pay that kind of money.
No, but was someone else going to pay it? You thought you kind of.
I thought it would have been crazy. I mean,
you were right. And you were right.
There was. I mean, look, the Warner Brothers paid a multi-million-dollar advance for Roger and Me. So was it possible? I suppose, but
right. Okay.
But Roger and Me was a much more commercial movie on the surface.
Yeah.
I mean, it was funny. It was, it was shorter.
Right.
But in any case, so yeah, I didn't believe it was going to happen. So I said, let's stay in touch. then we went back to New York. I set up a screening for the rest of the gang at Fine Line to see the movie. They all felt really good about it, and Liz and I said, well, nobody's going to buy it for that much money. Let's give it a shot. And we flew to Chicago, had a meeting with Iltis and his partner Dave Sikich and the three filmmakers, and somebody from PBS was there, and their lawyer who was John Sloss, and we presented a plan to them and walked in the door and basically said, look, we're not going to spend a fortune. We're not going to get into a bidding war for this. But what we want to do is convince you that we're the best distributor for this movie, that we will do the best job. And if you decide that we are the best people to handle this movie, then you come back to us with a reasonable amount of money that you're interested in, and we'll see if we can do it. And the plan that we presented to them was something that we put together on the airplane on the way to Chicago. But what it centered on was a kind of accident of corporate synergy, which is that our company, Fine Line,
Mhm.
owned by New Line.
Yep.
New Line Cinema was our parent company. New Line had just recently been bought by Turner Entertainment, Ted Turner's company.
Mhm.
And Turner owned an NBA team. He owned a regional sports network. He owned TBS, which was the home of the NBA on television at that time, and numerous other properties that crossed over into sports and whatever. He owned the Atlanta Braves, what, et cetera. Um, so part of the presentation we made to them was that we were uniquely positioned to be able to get all of these resources on board to help promote the film. And now, did I believe that? I had never met anybody from Turner. And, corporate synergy, truthfully, is mostly a myth. I mean, because everybody's competing to make
Right.
sure that they get their bigger bonuses and, whatever. So, cooperate with another branch of the same company, that never happens. But we made the case that we were going to try at the very least. And then the filmmakers had a request of us, and we made a promise that we would pursue this, which is that they wanted to set up some kind of educational program around the movie to get inner city youth to come see the film and to have a curriculum about responsibility, not letting people take advantage of you because of your sports ability. The sorts of things that are inherent within the movie Hoop Dreams,
Yeah.
that are real issues for inner city kids who all, in many cases, are dreaming of eventually ending up at the NBA at some point. So we promised them that that was something we would pursue. Um, cut to I'm going to cut over a bunch of stuff because I'm going into way too much detail, but
Right.
bottom line is we ended up getting the film for way less money. We gave them a fairly large piece of gross, which was kind of unprecedented at the time. And I don't know what was going on in my head, but I can tell you that eventually it got me into trouble because it was a deal where they were guaranteed to end up getting some profit out of the movie, even if it didn't do all that well, that they would get something out of it. So then I began a tour where I went down to Atlanta. I met with the heads of all the Turner divisions, one by one, convinced them to get aboard to help promote this little movie that we were going to be going out with. They kind of signed on and promised us certain things, and then I used that as leverage to meet with other NBA franchises, including the Bulls. And they weren't going to let the Atlanta Hawks one up them, so they signed on to help promote it. These are all the things that
Wow.
were in the back of my mind, when we were talking about This Old Cub, about the sorts of
Yeah.
things we could do with the Cubs.
Yeah. Yeah. That's
Um,
amazing. It's amazing though that like the filmmakers bring in their like what they want to do with the film, the educating part of it. Yeah, a lot similar stuff there, but that film grossed what over 11 million?
Eventually, I think so. I mean,
Yeah,
its initial run, it was like 8.5 million, which if you translate that to today's dollars,
yeah,
probably like $30 million or something.
huge,
Yeah.
huge. It's amazing to hear you talk about Hoop Dreams that way because there's so much involved on the marketing end of film, an independent film. And like you said, grabbing those resources, connecting people that can help put it out there in a larger way. And that's what independent films have to do when they're outside the system. And that's what was so great about you, Ira, when you came on This Old Cub. And obviously, I'm sure the guys at Hoop Dreams say the same thing, man. We got the right guy. Even though they're wondering, do we have the right guy? Because you're being so honest with them. And sometimes it's hard to take that honesty as a filmmaker because you want more. You want to hear more promising stuff. And it's like, no, this is what's going on. And this is how you have to get it done. And I slowly started to learn that from you. Like, wait a second. I got to back off a little bit here. I am pushing forward because you have to as a filmmaker. But by doing that, we did do some unique stuff. And it sounds like it happened there with Hoop Dreams, and you had all that ready to go with all the other films you did. But we need more guys like Ira Deutchman. That's
Oh
what we
well.
need. And I know that your son now is in doing the same thing in a way.
Yeah. Well, he's the head of acquisitions and production for Neon,
There you go.
and so yeah, he's definitely looking at movies through the same lens, trying to find movies that have that kind of hook, and they've had a lot of success with things like most recently with Anatomy of a Fall, but before that with oh God, why did it just slip my mind? The South Korean film that won Best Picture,
Oh, Parasite.
Parasite. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes. Um, yeah, so yeah, it makes me very proud that he's doing very similar stuff. But look, going back to what you were just talking about, Jeff, what's so interesting is that it's fun to talk about the successes, like
Hmm.
uh, like This Old Cub, was definitely a success of its type, and Hoop Dreams, of course. But sometimes you put all that effort in and it doesn't work.
Yeah.
So it can be really frustrating,
Oh, I know.
and it's one of the things that I always think about is that one of the reasons why so many independent filmmakers eventually give up is because they put so much heart and soul and sweat and sometimes money into things that don't pan out, and after a while you have to earn something to live off of or whatever. So it helps if you can actually find ways of turning whatever your particular strength is into some kind of steady income that can support the independent filmmaking.
Yep.
And there's lots of different ways of doing it, but I think that you have to be entrepreneurial, you have to be smart, you have to realize what your strengths and weaknesses are, you have to surround yourself with other people who make up for your weaknesses. There's never been anybody born who knows it all. So it's like, trust other people, find people you can trust. It's all about a team effort. So when you praise me, as good as that feels, I always think about the fact that I had a team around me
Of
that
course.
that was on the same team, that was really working their asses off trying to get this stuff done. And fortunately, they bought into my vision of whatever it was that we were working on at any given time. And many of them went on to have their own companies and their own, situations. But and one other thing too is that I also feel like, and I'm kind of a broken record when it comes to this because I made a speech at the independent what used to be called the Independent Feature Project, at their annual market. And this must have been in, if you give me a second, probably something like 1982 or 83, in which I talked about how everybody wants to be a filmmaker and nobody wants to be the marketer. That that if people put the same kind of ingenuity and thinking into the selling of these projects, that it would make life a whole lot easier for the rest of us, you know. And I still feel the same way. I feel like so many independent distributors are, and I'm sure that it has to do with their scar tissue, the same way that I
Hmm.
talked about with Rugoff, where they keep banging their heads against the wall trying to get an audience for things and they're not working. And instead of saying the market's dead, maybe you should be thinking about, what am I doing wrong? What should I be brainstorming about new ways of looking at this? It's and if we had more people doing that, I think the market would be a whole lot healthier.
I agree 100% with you. And as a filmmaker, I had to do that. I had to learn the marketing side of filmmaking, the distribution side of filmmaking. And that's the education I got with you. And it was amazing. It really was. I don't look at a project any other way with saying, okay, where can we do this if we can't get anybody? How can we do this? And so tell Jeff next year, be ready for my phone call because we have another one coming down the pipeline. But I think that way because of working with you and because of getting burned and because of putting so much work into a film and then not having a home for it or having a home that didn't treat you well, gave you a doghouse outside, so I love that. And I think, Ira, with you and why you do have great people around you because you give them nothing but honesty. And we need more of that, man. Be honest with that filmmaker. Look at me because I can accept honesty, but I can't say that I could do this and then they don't do it, And so that's the road that you have always lived on. And at first, I might have been like bucking up against you, but boy, I got in line not too long after I knew that. Okay, all right, we're going somewhere here.
So
So
does this mean that you have a marketing plan for this podcast?
yeah, hey man, we're growing. This is the second season, so people are listening. So we love it. We're on every platform. And man, I got one last question. It's what is your favorite baseball film? Not a documentary, baseball film.
I would have to say the Bad News Bears.
Okay, give me top five then. We're doing top five in our opening. So what's the top five?
That's going to be more difficult. I mean, I love Major League.
Okay,
I would say
the
The Natural.
comedies, the natural. Yeah,
Yeah. Um, Eight Men Out,
there
John
you go.
Sayles' film.
Yeah, I hit into a double play in that film, Ira.
There you go.
Yeah,
And then there's one other one that's on the tip of my tongue. League of Their Own.
yeah. Oh, that was great. Yeah, that was excellent, man. Yeah, good choices. Ira, thank you so much for being on. Like I said, man, what's going on in your life now? Where are you heading next? I know when's that book coming out?
Working on it.
Oh, great.
It's slow, but I'm actually working on a memoir to try to capture some of these stories and
Beautiful.
get them out there before I forget them.
There's gonna be something special with that, man.
Yeah, but my most immediate project is actually a first time project for me. I'm working on a theater piece, a play, and it actually just opened 2 weeks ago in Washington D.C. And got really good reviews, and we're hoping to bring it to Broadway.
Oh, excellent.
It's based on a 1975 independent film called Hester Street,
Oh,
made by John Micklin Silver. It's a film. It's a film that is beloved among audiences that were around at that time, and it's a great story. We could save this for another podcast because it would take too much time. But the movie itself was independently made, independently distributed, was a big hit. It made over $6 million at the box office, launched the career of Joan Micklin Silver as a director, and now it's a play. So
that's great, man.
yeah.
Wow. I hope it comes to LA, man. We'll be there for sure. And you had the 2019 documentary that you did, Searching for Rugoff, which is excellent. People, filmmakers, you got to watch that.
It's available on the Criterion Channel right
Oh,
now.
excellent. Okay.
Or if you want to rent it, it's on Amazon and Google and
Okay, great.
iTunes. It's on everything.
Excellent.
Yeah.
All right, Ira. Maybe we'll catch each other at a Cubs game shortly. I don't know. Are you heading to Wrigley at all this year?
Hoping to go when the Mets are there.
Right on, right on.
I think that's the it's like the second to the last weekend in June.
Okay. Yeah, that's right. That's right. And I think that's the weekend. That's a good weekend to go because the 84 Cubs are going to be there. They're doing something for the 84 Cubs.
Oh, cool. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. So hopefully you run into a couple of those. Those guys are great too, man. All right, Ira. It was a pleasure. All right. Great talk with you. I'll talk to you soon.
All right. Take care.
Yeah, you too.
Bye-bye.
Bye now.
This Santo moment is brought to you by Onesti Entertainment. In the documentary This Old Cub, Ron Santo was asked by his son what it takes to be a professional baseball player. Ron said, "You can have all the talent in the world. It's not going to get you through. It's what you have in your heart." That Santoid was brought to you by Onesti Entertainment.
I'm calling my buddy Joel Tabbush, who lives down the block from me in Burbank. Big Cubs fan, been in the film and TV industry for most of his life, did some badass music videos, just a cool guy. He's got this cool house that we hang out. He's got his own bar in there called the Ted Kennedy's. Real cool place we hang out at, but fun guy, cool guy, really good friend of mine. So I'm going to give him a buzz. He has no idea.
Crackerjack.
This call is being recorded.
Hey,
Hello?
you're my Crackerjack.
Oh my God, dude! Really? I have to go outside?
What do you mean you got to go outside? Why do you got to go outside? What do you mean?
How you doing, Jeff?
Are you watching the game?
I am,
Do you think they pulled him too early? Kid was pitching well.
dude. I think they should have pulled him about a batter earlier. I mean, he's pitching great.
Yeah, I just turned on the TV, so I didn't know. I just saw that they just got 2 runs, so they had a 3-0 lead.
Yeah.
But,
I mean, he was looking good, but I think it was about time to take him out, and it was a little too late. But if our bullpen holds up, we should be okay. You hear my voice? My voice sounds like non-committal. We should be okay.
Right? We'll see, man. It's early, right? We don't know what the bullpen's like, but so far, not bad. Hey, man.
Well, you know what, Jeff? Yes.
What?
No. I was going to say everything changed when Justin Steele went down the first game.
Yeah, no doubt. Well,
and that's not an excuse, but this is where we are now. So,
that's true. That's true. Glad he went down now than in the middle of the season. That's for sure.
True.
So, hey, man,
True.
let me ask you something. How long have you been in film and TV?
My first job in any regard in advertising or film or TV was in like 1990. So that's going to be like 35 years now.
Long time, man. Yeah. Because I was talking to Ira Deutchman, who's literally he ran 3 different studios and just talking about the business. And how do you feel about it today? I mean, what do you think about the business today? It's tougher today than when you were working, like full time, going at it hard?
100%. 100%. I mean, back then, you know what? It's like, it's interesting because I don't know the dynamic now of like someone my age, probably like 19, 20 years old, getting into film and like working with people that work with Madonna, working with people that work like on huge movies like David Fincher and stuff like that. And you're my age and you're like, whoa, this is amazing. And then you know people and you start working on music videos and you start working on commercials and it gets really big and fast. And now I think that with the media differences now and the media business, I mean, it seemed like a small community then, and now it seems like a huge, I mean, there was no streaming services back then. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah, totally. How many music videos have you done?
Probably 100, 150.
Wow. A lot of cool bands. Name some of those bands that you worked with, man, in the 90s.
Wow. I mean, if it's going to be like, Elton John or Tina Turner or Tom Petty or Iggy Pop or Lemmy from Motorhead or Green Day or, I mean, it goes on. And it's just like, it's a job day to day and you're so lucky to be being able to do that. You know what I mean?
Yeah. It does feel different today, man, with streaming. it's like there's really no set structure. It's like it's spread out.
Well, what is it? What do you think it is?
I think, I was talking to Ira. Ira ran 3 studios, ran Fine Line, and thinks that, the movies are coming back with the younger generation. Like, they think, like...
But why? But why is that?
Because they want to have it. It's all about, they want to go to the theaters. I think the older people don't want to go to the theaters so much because they're comfortable at home. So it's getting that theater vibe going again, and it's getting that independent film going again, that where you go out and do it on your own, and you bust it, and you also market it. And there's, I think that's coming back again. He does, and he knows a lot of it, and I'm feeling it a little bit too, because some of these big, action, cartoon, the comic book stuff, they're starting to fail, the big ones. So we'll see, man. Maybe we got a last ditch effort here in Act 3.
Well, I wouldn't even call it last ditch effort. You know what I mean? Like all our lives, things happen when you don't expect it. So that's, these are the times when you like have these conversations like we're having, and then the next day we're like, hey, this is happening now, or it's not, so it's like part of life, but it's awesome.
Right, man. Right. And I got to ask you this too, Joe. You went to the same high school as Pete Lecoq. How did you become a Cubs fan growing up in LA?
That's a very easy question to answer, Jeff. When I played T-ball, remember T-ball? I don't know if you can remember that far back.
No,
my team was the Cubs.
What does that mean? What is T-ball?
Well, my team was the Cubs.
Your team was a Cub in T-ball? That did it, the T-ball Cubs?
This was like 1969 or 1970 when I first had a Cubs shirt on, and then, wait, I know I'm a Dodger fan because my dad takes me to Dodger games at Dodger Stadium, but what's this other team called, the Cubs? And at that moment, I became a Cubs fan, and that's been a long time ago, dude. And because you know me, man, and it's like I love. I mean, Dodgers are the Dodgers, and they were different kind of Dodgers back then. Now they're like a multi-whatever team, but the Cubs are always the Cubs. I love them so much,
Yeah, I know you do, man. You are a big Cubs fan. And it's great how we met at our local club down the street, Tony's Darts Away. Would you want to get a beer in a little bit here? What are you doing?
I might be here now, so I'd love to see you.
You might be there. That's why you wanted to go outside. All right, I'm coming over to meet you there. Hey, listen, we did a thing here, top 5 baseball movies of all time, feature films, no documentaries. What are they for you? Top 5.
Oh my God! You know what? I'm not going to say Field of Dreams. I'm not going. I don't really have. I got to be honest. I don't have any really favorite baseball documentaries. I mean, baseball movies.
Not documentaries, features.
No, I don't have any. I don't have any baseball features that I love.
How come?
I mean, they come to mind right now, like Field of Dreams was cool when I watched it, but I wasn't crying or whatever. I mean, I'm trying to think like there's Chicago Bears movies, like the Brian Piccolo, that whole story. Like I don't think of any baseball movies that I love so much. The Robert, but I mean, exactly. You hear my enthusiasm in the question because it's like
you're out. Yeah, doing punk rock. I got it.
No. That's not necessarily true. That's not necessarily true, dude, at all. But I mean,
how about
what's Jeremy? But no. At that time, I was being too punk rock. Yes, at that time I was.
See, there you go. I know a little bit about you. All right. Well, I'm coming over to have a beer with you, man. Great talking with you. Save a seat.
You too.
And let's hope the Cubbies get this game. Here, we got 2 more innings.
I'm going to go back inside and watch. Hurry up and catch the end with me.
Okay.
Hey, good talking to you, man. Adios.
See you in a second.
Go.
Yeah.
Thanks for listening to our show. Special thanks to our cool Crackerjacks, Scott Nelson, Jim McCauley, Debbie Foley, Sherry Matarisi, Terry O'Brien, Gary Tallman, and Anne-Marie Pascule, and Jim Muleschlegel.
This show is made possible because of all of them, because of all of our subscribers. And if you want to support the show and be a cool Crackerjack yourself, subscribe on our Patreon page by clicking the link below this episode, or go to our Patreon tab on our website, www.peanutspopcornandcrackerjacks.com.
Remember to click the follow button for the next episode and leave a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, especially from this podcast.
Yeah, I think we're going to put a poll up there. And don't hesitate to write. Give us suggestions. Tell us how you're liking the show. Email jeff.ppcpodcast@gmail.com.
For my closing quote, baseball is supposed to be hard. If it wasn't hard, everyone would do it. The hard is what makes it great. A league of their own.
Toodaloo!
SantoFilms.com, the place to buy This Old Cub DVDs, posters, and This Old Cub t-shirts. Get yourself one now at SantoFilms.com.